June 1942, the Kuban region, southern Russia. A German infantry company digs into defensive positions near Krasnodar. They've survived the spring offensives. They've held against Soviet armor. They know what war sounds like, the scream of Stukas, the rumble of T-34s, the whistle of Katyusha rockets. They know fear, but tonight, something different hunts them. Around 11 p.m., sentries report a sound. Faint at first, not the roar of engines they expect from Soviet bombers. Something quieter, slower, like fabric tearing in the wind. The sound builds, then stops completely. Silence, then explosions. Chaos in the darkness. Small bombs carefully placed on ammunition dumps, supply trucks, command posts. Men scramble. Searchlights sweep the sky. Nothing. The sound returns from a different direction. More bombs. The pattern repeats through the night. 8 times. 12 times. 15 times dawn comes. The damage assessment shocks field commanders. Precision strikes throughout their lines. Fuel depots burning. Artillery positions cratered. But no one saw the aircraft clearly. Sentries describe shadows. Mechanics report fabric fragments near impact sites. The sound, that sound, becomes the subject of heated arguments. Some call it supernatural. Others blame Soviet trickery. One officer writes in his after-action report, "We are being attacked by ghosts. German intelligence investigates. They collect evidence, fabric scraps, wood fragments, eyewitness testimonies that contradict modern aerial warfare doctrine. The aircraft fly too slowly for fighters to intercept effectively, too low for radar detection, too quiet for early warning. And they come every night, relentlessly, methodically, targeting weak points with uncanny precision. The attacks spread. All along the Eastern Front, German units report the same phenomenon. The sound becomes infamous. Soldiers give it a name, Nachthexen, night witches. The term starts as mockery, becomes respect, then transforms into dread. Because every night when the sound begins, men die. Equipment burns. Sleep becomes impossible. Combat effectiveness deteriorates not from massive casualties, but from psychological erosion. The certainty that darkness belongs to the enemy. Wehrmacht commanders request night fighters. Deploy searchlight batteries, institute blackout protocols stricter than anything used against RAF heavy bombers. Nothing works consistently. The attackers adapt faster than the defenses. They fly between searchlight beams. They cut engines to glide silently toward targets. They strike in weather that grounds other aircraft. They operate with an intimate knowledge of the battlefield that suggests something beyond standard reconnaissance. By August 1942, German intelligence finally identifies the aircraft type, Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes. Training aircraft, crop dusters, planes that first flew in 1928, pre-war aviation technology attacking the most advanced military machine in Europe. The report circulates through Wehrmacht command structure. Some officers refuse to believe it. Others demand explanations for how obsolete biplanes achieve what modern bombers cannot. Consistent, nightly disruption of German operations across hundreds of kilometers of front line. But here's what German intelligence doesn't yet know, doesn't yet understand. The pilots aren't ghosts. They're not even what the Wehrmacht considers typical combat aviators. They're women, young Soviet women, many still teenagers, flying the most dangerous missions of the entire war. Volunteers who joined when the Soviet Union faced annihilation. Women who transformed warfare itself, proving that psychological impact often matters more than technological superiority. Women who would fly more combat sorties than most male bomber crews would survive. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment, all female, from pilots to navigators to mechanics to armorers, operating under conditions that would break veteran units, flying aircraft that offered no parachutes because there wasn't room, no radios because they added weight. No defensive armament because every kilogram mattered for bombs. Just 2 women per aircraft, pilot and navigator, hunting German positions in darkness, night after night after night. The German soldiers huddling in trenches along the Eastern Front don't know this yet. They only know the sound, that terrible, relentless sound that means bombs are coming and there's nothing they can do to stop it. They only know that darkness, which once offered protection, now brings terror. They only know that the ghosts are real. And the night witches have only just begun. Moscow, October 1941. The German Wehrmacht stands 40 kilometers from the Kremlin. Army Group Center has shattered Soviet defensive lines. Leningrad faces encirclement. The entire Ukraine collapses. In 6 months, the Soviet Union has lost 3 million soldiers, killed, wounded, or captured. The Red Army bleeds divisions faster than Stalin can raise them. Aircraft losses exceed 10,000. Trained pilots die in weeks. The Soviet aviation schools cannot replace them quickly enough. The math is brutal, simple, unforgiving. At current attrition rates, the Soviet Union will run out of pilots before it runs out of aircraft. Marina Raskova knows this. She's a national hero, holder of the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal, awarded in 1938 for a record-breaking Moscow to Far East flight. She's a navigator, an aviator, and one of the most famous women in the Soviet Union. Stalin trusts her, listens to her. When Raskova walks into his office in October 1941, she carries thousands of letters from Soviet women demanding combat roles, demanding the right to fight for their country, demanding access to the cockpits that men monopolize even as those men die in staggering numbers. Stalin faces the greatest crisis of his regime. Pragmatism overrides ideology. He signs the order number 0099, issued October 8, 1941, authorization for 3 all-female aviation regiments. Fighter Regiment, Day Bomber Regiment, Night Bomber Regiment. Complete units, pilots, navigators, mechanics, armorers, support staff, everything female. An experiment born from desperation, opposed by nearly every male officer in Soviet Aviation Command. The opposition runs deep. Soviet military culture mirrors Russian patriarchy. Women serve as nurses, political officers, anti-aircraft crews, not combat pilots. The physical demands, the technical complexity, the psychological pressure. Male commanders insist women cannot handle modern aerial warfare. They cite training statistics, physical requirements, combat effectiveness studies. They argue that resources spent training women represent wasted capacity that should develop male pilots instead. Raskova ignores them. She receives authorization to recruit nationwide. The response overwhelms her. Thousands of women apply within weeks. University students, factory workers, Aero Club members, teachers, seamstresses, women from every Soviet republic, every social class, every background. Most have no flight experience. Many have never seen an aircraft up close. But they volunteer knowing the odds, knowing the danger, knowing that Soviet aviation suffers 70% casualties among bomber crews. They come anyway. Raskova selects carefully. She needs discipline, intelligence, adaptability. Physical size matters. Smaller pilots fit better in cramped cockpits, require less oxygen, impose less weight penalty. Most recruits stand between 150 and 165 centimeters. Many weigh less than 50 kilograms. They're young, average age around 20 years old. Some lie about their age, presenting forged documents to join at 16 or 17. Engels, a city on the Volga River, becomes the training center. December 1941, winter closes in. The women arrive wearing civilian clothes because the Red Army has no uniforms in their sizes. They receive men's uniforms, boots 3 sizes too large, stuffed with newspaper or rags to fit. They sleep in unheated barracks, train in temperatures reaching minus 30 Celsius. Learn navigation, meteorology, aircraft mechanics, bombing tactics, night flying procedures. The training is abbreviated, compressed, brutal. Normal Soviet pilot training requires 2 years. These women receive 6 months. They fly whatever aircraft the training center can spare, usually obsolete models considered too damaged or outdated for frontline male units. They practice on Po-2 biplanes, designed in 1928 as primary trainers. 2 open cockpits, fabric-covered wings, maximum speed 150 kilometers per hour. No radio, no guns. No parachutes that fit. The male instructors vary. Some embrace the assignment professionally. Others sabotage training, believing women have no place in combat aviation. They assign impossible tasks, set unfair standards, mock failures publicly. Raskova intervenes repeatedly, removing instructors, fighting bureaucratic battles, leveraging her hero status to protect her pilots from institutional hostility. April 1942. Training concludes. 3 regiments emerge. The 586th Fighter Aviation Regiment receives Yak-1 fighters. The 587th Bomber Aviation Regiment gets PE-2 dive bombers. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment, Raskova's personal command, receives Po-2 biplanes, the same trainers they learned on. The same obsolete aircraft that every combat pilot considers suicide machines. because the Soviet military establishment never expected these women to succeed, never believed they would survive, never imagined they would transform night harassment bombing into the most psychologically devastating tactic on the Eastern Front. The 588th receives its combat assignment, Southern Front, supporting ground operations against German forces in the Caucasus. They will fly at night, target German rear positions, ammunition dumps, supply columns, command posts, artillery positions. They will fly multiple sorties per night, taking off, bombing, landing, rearming, repeating. No mission considered too dangerous, no target too deep behind enemy lines. The male bomber regiments fly 1, maybe 2 missions per night in modern aircraft with defensive armament, radios, and parachutes. The 588th will fly 5 to 15 missions per night in fabric biplanes with none of those advantages. High Command expects massive casualties, considers the regiment expendable, a propaganda experiment that will prove women cannot handle combat aviation pressure. The women arrive at their forward airbase in May 1942, unpack their gear, inspect their aircraft, receive target assignments. The male ground crews stare. Some laugh. Others shake their heads. A few offer quiet respect, recognizing courage even if they doubt capability. That night, the first missions launch. Engines cough to life. Po-2 biplanes taxi in darkness, take off into uncertain sky, navigate by compass and map reading, using rivers and roads as guides. Approach German positions, cut engines, glide silently, drop bombs, restart engines, escape before searchlights lock on. They return, rearm, launch again and again. The night witches go to war, and the Eastern Front will never be the same. The Polikarpov Po-2 was never meant for war. Nikolai Polikarpov designed it in 1928 as a primary trainer, the aircraft where Soviet pilots learned to fly. Simple construction, forgiving handling, cheap to produce. 2 open cockpits arranged in tandem, pilot in the rear, student or navigator in front. Upper and lower wings connected by wooden struts and wire bracing. The entire airframe covered in plywood and fabric, treated with aircraft dope for weatherproofing. Maximum speed, 150 kilometers per hour at sea level. Service ceiling, 3,000 meters. Range, 400 kilometers with full fuel load. The specifications read like a museum piece by 1942 standards. The Messerschmitt Bf-109F, Germany's frontline fighter, cruises at 5 and 60 kilometers per hour. The Junkers Ju-88 standard Luftwaffe bomber operates at 7,000 meters altitude. Modern aerial warfare demands speed, altitude, defensive armament, and armor protection. The Po-2 offers none of these advantages, but the 588th Night Bomber Regiment doesn't need modern capabilities. They need something else entirely. Something German tactical doctrine never anticipated. They need to exploit the Po-2's weaknesses as strengths. The math of interception explains everything. Bf-109 fighter has a stall speed, the minimum speed required to maintain controlled flight, of approximately 175 kilometers per hour. The Po-2's maximum speed is 150 kilometers per hour. German fighters physically cannot fly slowly enough to engage Po-2s without stalling and falling from the sky. Pilots attempting intercepts report the same frustrating experience. Approach from behind, reduce throttle to match speed, aircraft shudders and drops. The Po-2 simply outruns them by flying slower than physics allows modern fighters to match. Altitude presents similar problems. German fighters operate efficiently between 4,000 and 8,000 meters. The Po-2 flies between 400 and 1,200 meters, below the effective engagement envelope of most interceptors. Diving attacks work only if pilots can acquire targets visually in darkness, calculate deflection angles for extreme speed differentials, and fire accurately during a brief window lasting seconds. Most diving attacks fail. The Po-2 turns, side slips, or simply disappears against dark terrain. The aircraft's primitive construction becomes an asset. Fabric and wood absorb or deflect small arms fire better than metal fuselages. Bullets punch through fabric, leaving small holes that minimally affect flight characteristics. Machine gun rounds designed to penetrate armor and rupture fuel tanks pass through Po-2s without triggering catastrophic damage. One aircraft returns from a mission with 42 bullet holes, still flyable. The women patch it with fabric and dope, return it to service within hours. But the true weapon isn't the aircraft. It's the sound, The M11 engine, a 5-cylinder radial producing 100 horsepower, creates a distinctive acoustic signature. At cruise power, the sound resembles wind through trees or fabric tearing. At reduced power during attack runs, it nearly disappears. German soldiers learn to dread that sound. It becomes a Pavlovian trigger. When they hear it, bombs follow within seconds. The sound penetrates dugouts, trenches, bunkers. No defensive position offers psychological safety. The women, perfect acoustic tactics. They approach targets in groups of 3 aircraft. The first Po-2 flies straight at the target, engine running, drawing searchlights and anti-aircraft fire. The second and third aircraft circle to flanking positions, cut their engines, and glide silently toward the target while defenders focus on the noisy decoy. They drop their bombs, usually 4 50-kilogram bombs per aircraft, then restart engines and escape before defenders reorient. The technique requires extraordinary skill. Gliding in darkness without engine power means no second chances. The pilot must judge altitude, airspeed, and glide angle perfectly. Too high, and the bomb load misses. Too low, and the aircraft crashes. No instruments provide adequate reference. The Po-2's cockpit contains only basic flight instruments, none illuminated to preserve night vision. Pilots navigate by feel, by the wind against their faces, by the sound of air flowing over wings. Nadezhda Popova, one of the regiment's most experienced pilots, describes the sensation: you fly by instinct. You feel the aircraft through your body. The stick trembles in your hand when airspeed drops. The wind pressure against your face tells you speed. You watch the ground. Darker patches are fields, lighter patches are roads or rivers. You aim by releasing bombs when the target passes between your feet. The bomb load itself represents creative improvisation. The Po-2 carries no bomb bay. Ground crews attach wooden racks under the lower wings and fuselage. Each rack holds 2 50-kilogram high-explosive bombs. The navigator releases them manually using levers connected to simple mechanical releases. No bomb sight. No calculation instruments, just experience, judgment, and courage. 4 50-kilogram bombs, 200 kilograms total, represents minimal ordnance by strategic bombing standards. A British Lancaster carries 6,400 kilograms. An American B-17 carries 3,600 kilograms. But the 588th doesn't fly strategic missions. They fly harassment operations, precision strikes against tactical targets, and they fly 15 missions per night per aircraft. 15 times 200 kilograms equals 3,000 kilograms delivered per aircraft per night. 20 aircraft equals 60,000 kilograms. Every night, regardless of weather, regardless of German defenses, the psychological impact exceeds the physical damage. German soldiers cannot rest, cannot sleep, cannot predict when or where attacks will occur. The night witches strike ammunition dumps at 10 p.m., return at 1 at night to hit the same position again, return at early morning for a third strike. They target command posts, forcing staff officers to relocate repeatedly. They crater roads, delaying supply columns. They bomb bivouac areas, creating constant anxiety. Wehrmacht after action reports document the effect. Frontline units report combat effectiveness, degradation from sleep deprivation. Soldiers suffer psychological casualties, anxiety, hypervigilance, combat fatigue. Medical officers prescribe sedatives, but drugged soldiers cannot respond to actual Soviet ground attacks. Defensive sectors facing night witch operations require reinforcement, not because of casualties, but because of morale collapse. German command responds with increasingly desperate countermeasures. They deploy additional searchlight batteries, useless when the women cut engines. They position anti-aircraft guns at every vulnerable point. The guns cannot traverse quickly enough to track low-flying maneuvering targets. They request night fighters. The fighters cannot intercept effectively. They try balloon barrages. The Po-2s fly under the cables. They institute blackout procedures. The women navigate by memorized terrain features and don't need visible targets. Nothing works consistently. By autumn 1942, German intelligence acknowledges reality in classified reports. The Nachthexen represent an unsolvable tactical problem. Obsolete aircraft flown by women the Wehrmacht doesn't consider legitimate combatants have created a form of warfare that modern military technology cannot counter effectively. The reports recommend accepting the harassment as a cost of Eastern Front operations. Accept the casualties. Accept the psychological pressure. Accept that night belongs to the enemy. The women of the 588th read none of these reports. They don't need German acknowledgement to understand their effectiveness. They see it in the target damage. They hear it from Soviet ground commanders who praise their support. They feel it in the increasing desperation of German anti-aircraft fire. And every night they fly again. Nadezhda Popova is 19 years old when she flies her first combat mission in May 1942. By war's end, she will fly 852 combat sorties. More missions than almost any other Soviet pilot, male or female. She will drop 980 tons of bombs on German positions, survive being shot down 3 times, watch friends die, earn Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military decoration in the Soviet system. But in May 1942, she's a teenager who learned to fly in peacetime Aero Club, trained on Po-2s for 6 months, and now faces combat against the most experienced military in Europe. Her first mission targets a German artillery position near Krimskaya. The briefing is simple: coordinates, target description, defensive threats. No elaborate planning, no intelligence updates. Just a map reference and an instruction: destroy the guns. She walks to her aircraft in darkness. Her navigator, Katya Ryabova, already sits in the forward cockpit. They check harnesses, confirm bomb load, verify fuel. The engine starts with a cough and settles into rough idle. Popova advances the throttle. The Po-2 rolls forward, gains speed, lifts off. Navigation at night requires constant attention. No radio means no ground guidance. No modern instruments means dead reckoning, compass heading, elapsed time, wind correction, terrain recognition. Popova flies at 800 meters altitude, low enough to see ground features but high enough to clear obstacles. The moon provides minimal illumination. She identifies the Kuban River, follows it south, then turns east toward the target area. German searchlights activate 15 kilometers from target. Brilliant white beams sweep the sky in coordinated patterns. Anti-aircraft tracers arc upward, red dots climbing through darkness. Popova doesn't evade yet. Maintaining course and altitude preserves fuel and ensures accurate navigation. The searchlights probe closer. She waits. Timing matters more than immediate evasion. 2 kilometers from target, searchlights intensify. 3 beams converge, searching for her aircraft. Popova side slips, pushing left rudder while holding right aileron. The Po-2 slides sideways through the air, changing position without changing heading. The searchlights sweep past. She centers controls, continues approach. 1 kilometer. She sees the target, gun emplacements arranged in a defensive cluster, muzzle flashes still visible from recent firing. She cuts the engine. The sudden silence feels absolute. Wind noise replaces engine roar. The Po-2 glides forward, descending, speed bleeding away. Ryabova leans over the cockpit edge, watching the ground rush closer, hand on the bomb release lever. Popova maneuvers by feel. Stick pressure. Rudder correction. The target slides beneath the nose. Ryabova pulls the release. 4 bombs drop in sequence. Popova counts seconds. 1, 2, 3. 4 explosions ripple across the gun position. She restarts the engine. It catches immediately, not always guaranteed with the temperamental M11, full throttle. The Po-2 accelerates, climbs, turns away from searchlights and tracers. Return flight, land, refuel, rearm, launch again. 15 missions that first night. 15 takeoffs and landings in darkness on a primitive airstrip. 15 approaches through German defenses. 15 bomb runs. No injuries, no losses. Mission successful. This becomes routine. But routine doesn't mean safe. Every mission risks death. Engine failure means forced landing in enemy territory, capture or execution. Structural failure means no parachute can save you. The Po-2 flies too low for successful bailout. Navigation error means flying into unexpected defenses, searchlights, fighters, concentrated anti-aircraft fire. Weather kills as easily as German guns. Thunderstorms, icing, fog. Popova develops survival instincts. She learns which German units defend aggressively and which fire, randomly. She memorizes terrain features, river bends, road intersections, distinctive forests, creating mental maps more detailed than any chart. She recognizes individual searchlight patterns, understanding crew behavior from beam movements. She develops intuition for anti-aircraft fire, when to evade, when to ignore, when to abort. August 1942, mission over the Taman Peninsula. Popova and Ryabova approach a German supply depot. Standard attack profile, engine cut, glide approach, bomb release. But tonight, something goes wrong. Searchlights acquire them during the glide. Multiple beams converge, holding them in brilliant light. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. Tracers converge from 3 positions. The first burst misses. The second burst tears through the lower wing. The third burst punctures the fuel tank. Gasoline streams from ruptured metal. The slipstream carries volatile liquid past the cockpit, past the tail. One spark, one tracer round, and the entire aircraft becomes a fireball. Popova can smell the fuel, can see it glistening in searchlight beams. She has seconds to decide. Restart the engine, risk igniting fuel vapors, immolating herself and Ryabova, or glide to a forced landing, almost certainly in German-held territory, meaning capture or death. She chooses the engine, hits the starter. The M11 cranks. Once, twice, catches, the propeller windmills, combustion begins, but the fuel vapor doesn't ignite. Physics and luck combine. The slipstream carries vapors away faster than fire can propagate. She advances throttle, trades altitude for speed, escapes the searchlights. They fly 40 kilometers back to base with fuel streaming from the tank, losing pressure, engine stuttering. Popova lands by feel, the runway barely visible, instruments useless in the damaged aircraft. They roll to a stop. Climb out. Mechanics count 42 bullet holes. The wing requires complete replacement. The fuel tank needs welding. The aircraft will fly again in 3 days. Popova flies a different aircraft that night. 15 missions, routine. The casualties accumulate despite skill and experience. July 1942. Vera Bellick and her navigator die when their Po-2 collides with a steel anti-aircraft cable in darkness. August 1942. Klavdia Fomicheva's aircraft explodes mid-air from a direct anti-aircraft hit. September 1942, Polina Makugon and her navigator go missing during a mission over Novorossiysk, never found. October 1942, Tatiana Makarova crashes during an emergency landing, burns to death before rescue arrives. Each loss impacts the regiment. They're not a large unit, about 40 pilots and 40 navigators at full strength, supporting perhaps 30 operational aircraft. Losing one crew means losing 2 friends, 2 experienced women who knew the tactics, who flew the missions, who understood the rhythm of night operations. The survivors attend brief memorial services, no elaborate ceremonies, no time for extended mourning. They paint red stars on the fuselages commemorating the fallen. Then they fly the next mission. Popova learns to compartmentalize, to separate friendship from operational necessity, to remember the dead without letting grief compromise performance. She becomes harder, more focused, more efficient. She develops a reputation, reliable, fearless, precise. Commanders assign her the most difficult missions, deep penetration raids, heavily defended targets, time-sensitive strikes requiring exact navigation, February 1943. The Battle of the Caucasus reaches its climax. German forces retreat toward the Crimea. Soviet ground commanders need continuous harassment of German columns to prevent organized withdrawal. The 588th flies maximum effort operations, 18 to 20 missions per aircraft per night. Popova flies 23 missions in one night, setting a regimental record. 23 takeoffs and landings in darkness. 23 approaches through defenses. 23 bomb runs. She lands at dawn, exhausted, faces numb from wind exposure, hands cramped from gripping controls. She sleeps 4 hours. Flies again the next night. This intensity continues through 1943, the Kuban bridgehead, the Kerch-Eltigen operation, the liberation of Crimea. The 588th moves forward as Soviet forces advance, establishing primitive airstrips close to front lines. The closer they operate to the front, the shorter the flight time to targets, the more missions they can fly per night. They operate from grass fields, dirt strips, captured German airfields. They live in tents, dugouts, abandoned buildings. Hot food is rare. Rest is rarer. Popova keeps flying. Through winter cold that freezes instruments and numbs exposed skin. Through spring mud that turns airfields into swamps. Through summer heat that reduces aircraft performance. The missions blur together. Hundreds of flights, thousands of bombs, endless nights of tension and violence and survival. She watches friends marry between missions. She celebrates promotions. She mourns more casualties. She receives decorations, Order of the Red Banner, Order of the Red Star, eventually Hero of the Soviet Union. The medals mean less than survival, less than the satisfaction of watching German positions burn, less than knowing that every mission she flies means Soviet infantry faces slightly less artillery fire tomorrow. By 1945, Popova has become one of the most experienced combat pilots in Soviet aviation. Her 852 missions represent more combat sorties than most bomber pilots fly in their entire careers. She's survived being shot down 3 times, crash-landed twice, flew through severe weather dozens of times. She knows every tactic, every evasion, every technique that the 588th has developed through 4 years of continuous operations. And she's still 22 years old. The war ends. The 588th receives official recognition, guard status, meaning elite designation within Soviet military hierarchy. The regiment becomes the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment. 23 women receive Hero of the Soviet Union. 30 women die in combat, a casualty rate lower than male bomber units flying modern aircraft with better defenses. May 15, 1945, Berlin has fallen. The Third Reich no longer exists. The 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment, formerly the 588th, ends combat operations after 134 consecutive nights of warfare. The statistics tell part of the story. 23 pilots and navigators receive Hero of the Soviet Union. 2 entire crews receive the honor, pilot and navigator both. The regiment flies approximately 24,000 combat sorties, drops 23,000 tons of ordnance on German positions, destroys or damages 17 river crossings, 9 railway stations, 2 oil depots, 26 warehouses, 12 fuel dumps, 176 armored vehicles, 86 firing positions, and 200 trucks. But numbers cannot capture what these women accomplished. They transformed aerial warfare doctrine. Before the 588th, night harassment bombing existed as a minor tactical consideration, nuisance raids using obsolete aircraft against low-value targets. After the 588th, Soviet military planners recognized psychological warfare as a strategic weapon. The concept of denying rest, creating constant anxiety, and degrading combat effectiveness through relentless, low-intensity operations became doctrine. Post-war Soviet aviation manuals include entire chapters on night harassment tactics, directly citing 588th operations as the foundational case study. The Germans never developed an effective counter. Despite 4 years of continuous operations, despite deploying night fighters and radar systems and sophisticated anti-aircraft networks, German forces never reduced the 588th's operational effectiveness. The casualty rate, approximately 30 fatalities from a regiment of 400 women over 4 years, remained lower than equivalent male bomber units flying modern aircraft. The Po-2's primitive simplicity defeated technological sophistication through asymmetric exploitation of operational parameters. This outcome contradicted every assumption made by Soviet and German military establishments in 1941. Women supposedly lacked the physical strength for combat. Aviation, yet they flew more sorties per night than male pilots, considered acceptable operational tempo. Women supposedly cracked under combat pressure, yet their psychiatric casualty rates remained negligible compared to male units. Women supposedly couldn't master technical skills, yet they became experts in navigation, bombing, aircraft maintenance, and tactical innovation. The evidence destroyed prejudice through undeniable performance. Marina Raskova didn't live to see final victory. She died January 4, 1943, when her PE-2 bomber crashed in bad weather near Saratov. She was leading her 587th Bomber Aviation Regiment, the Day Bomber Unit, to a new forward base. Her death shocked the Soviet Union. Stalin ordered a state funeral. Her ashes were interred in the Kremlin wall. She became the first woman honored with burial at that location. The women she recruited, the regiments she created, continued fighting in her name. The 586th Fighter Aviation Regiment, the all-female fighter unit, flew 4,419 sorties, participated in 125 air battles, and achieved approximately 38 confirmed kills. Lilia Litviak became the first female fighter ace in history with 12 solo kills and 4 shared. Before her death in August 1943, Katya Budanova achieved 11 kills before dying in combat July 1943. Both received Hero of the Soviet Union posthumously, though Litviak's award didn't come until 1990, 47 years after her death, due to bureaucratic complications regarding confirmation of her kills. The 587th Bomber Aviation Regiment, the dive bomber unit, flew 134 sorties dropped approximately 9 to 80 tons of bombs, and suffered higher casualties than the Night Bomber Regiment due to daylight operations against heavily defended targets. They flew P-2 dive bombers, modern, fast, heavily armed aircraft requiring different skills than the Po-2. The unit integrated male pilots during 1943 as casualties mounted and replacements arrived from standard training schools. By war's end, the regiment was approximately 60%, female still the highest proportion, of any bomber unit in any Air Force during World War II, but the 46th Guards, the Night Witches, remained all female from formation to final mission. No male pilots ever flew combat missions with the unit. This distinction matters. It demonstrates that women could sustain combat operations independently, without male integration, supervision, or support beyond standard military logistics. The regiment proved female combat capability conclusively, absolutely, without qualification. Post-war Soviet society complicated their legacy. Stalin's propaganda apparatus celebrated female heroism during the war years when national survival demanded total mobilization. After victory, traditional gender roles reasserted. The Soviet Union encouraged women to return to domestic life, to rebuild population after catastrophic losses, to resume peacetime roles. Female veterans faced difficult choices: continue military careers in organizations that no longer welcomed them, or transition to civilian life where combat experience carried little value. Most chose civilian life. Nadezhda Popova studied biology. Irina Sabrova became an economist. Yevgenia Zhigulenko worked in film production. They married, raised children, pursued careers unrelated to aviation. They attended regimental reunions annually, maintaining bonds forged in combat. They gave occasional interviews, participated in documentary films, spoke at schools. But Soviet society largely forgot them until the 1980s, when Glasnost allowed more open discussion of wartime history. Western audiences knew even less. Cold War politics ensured that Soviet military achievements received minimal coverage in Western media. The Night Witches remained obscure, occasionally mentioned in specialized military histories, largely unknown to general audiences. English-language accounts of Eastern Front aviation focused on German aces, Soviet male pilots, and strategic air campaigns. Women flying obsolete biplanes didn't fit convenient narratives about technological warfare or traditional combat heroism. This obscurity began changing in the 1990s after Soviet archives opened. Historians accessed wartime records, after-action reports, personal diaries, and official documentation. The scale and effectiveness of female aviation regiments became undeniable. Academic papers multiplied. Documentary films appeared. Popular histories included chapters on the Night Witches. By the 2010s, they achieved recognition as one of World War II's most remarkable combat units. But recognition came late. Most veterans had died. Popova survived until 2013, Sabrova until 2000, Zhigulenko until 1994. They lived long enough to see their story finally told, their achievements finally acknowledged, their sacrifice finally honored beyond Soviet propaganda narratives. Their legacy transcends historical curiosity. They demonstrated that gender imposes no inherent limitation on combat capability. That courage, skill, and determination matter more than physical size or traditional role expectations. That innovation often emerges from necessity and constraint, rather than resources and advantage. That psychological warfare can achieve strategic effects exceeding physical destruction. Military institutions worldwide studied their tactics. The concept of using slow, quiet aircraft for night harassment influenced unconventional warfare doctrine. Special operations forces adopted psychological disruption techniques pioneered by the 588th, modern asymmetric warfare. Theory traces intellectual lineage to tactics. These women invented, using enemy advantages against them, exploiting operational gaps, accepting constraints as opportunities. They flew fabric biplanes against the Wehrmacht and won, not through dramatic aerial victories or strategic bombing campaigns, through relentless nightly demonstration that darkness offered no safety, that rest was impossible, that the enemy controlled the night, through 24,000 missions over 4 years, through bombing runs numbering 15 per night per aircraft, through navigation by starlight and compass. through courage measured in consecutive nights of combat, not isolated acts of heroism. The German soldiers, who called them Nachthexen, night witches, meant the term as psychological projection. They needed to believe something supernatural hunted them, because accepting that young women in obsolete aircraft could dominate experienced Wehrmacht troops contradicted everything their military culture taught them about combat, about gender, about warfare itself. But the women were never witches, never supernatural, never anything except extraordinary human beings who volunteered when their country faced annihilation, who trained under impossible conditions, who flew missions that killed 30 of their sisters, who survived through skill and luck and determination. They were the night witches. They terrorized German lines for 4 years. They rewrote military history. They proved that courage has no gender, and they did it flying plywood biplanes, one mission at a time, through 1,134 nights of war.